Welcome everyone to the webinar here. We are talking about competency-based education and practice, insights and resources from innovative colleges. I'm Heather Penzak, Director of Innovation with Education Systems Center at NIU, but I'm going to actually kick it here to do a welcome from Whitney Thompson at ICCB.
Good afternoon, everybody. Nice to see you all here and excited that this conversation around competency-based education continues. We have been working to support the system over the last several years with a variety of opportunities to support the work that you all do to provide flexible pathways for learners, accelerated pathways for learners, and really just being able to be innovative in this space. This all began a few years ago when we worked to support a few colleges with some Perkins funding to develop a competency-based education program and participate in a backward design series that we actually contracted with the Competency-Based Education Network to help facilitate. And many of you were a part of that journey, and I appreciate the work that it took through those several in-person and virtual learning series. Outside of that, we have integrated CBE support into a variety of our grant initiatives, including our PATH grant. We have a cohort that's going through a learning series right now on competency-based education. Obviously, there's been a lot of work in the education, the ECE, the early childhood education space around competency-based education. There's a number of colleges working together, specifically on welding curriculum through the WIDS portfolio. And then, of course, Lewis and Clark hosted a CBE summit last week. And so, again, the conversations around CBE continue to be in the center of a lot of our work, and we're just excited, right, to be able to continue to support that. We have also had a number of colleges. And I think you can just skip. I think, Travis, I think that's you in that photo, actually. I think we have a number of colleges, and you can see the list of colleges that participated there, who have successfully submitted for approval competency-based education programs in welding and industrial maintenance, both to the ICCB and to the Higher Learning Commission. And so there is movement in this space, and I think we're going to continue to see that. This photo is when we visited Nicolet College up in Wisconsin, who has several CBE programs, even on the general education side. But this work that will be shared today, and Heather will be facilitating the conversation with several of the colleges presenting some of the resources they've developed are specific to welding and industrial technology. And so outside of the competencies that were developed, there were assessment plans and a number of other resources that can be taken advantage of in the classroom as it relates to, or in the lab as it relates to these two programs in a competency-based format. And so we're excited to share that all with you and find out, from you all, what more you would like to see in terms of resource sharing. That way, we're not recreating the wheel, that this information is available to you, that we create some opportunities for networking as well. So with that, happy to be here, excited to hear more about all the work that each college is doing. And Heather, I will kick it back over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Whitney. And so for today's plan, as Whitney spoke to, is really about gaining insights from peer institutions and accessing curated resources. We'd love to know who's here and joining us, so please share your name, role, organization in the chat. I will note, like, the presenters who are sharing today, they have specific things they're going to talk through, but they also know a ton about CBE in terms of how they've implemented it, and they still have questions too, and things that they're learning and trying to figure out. So I will say, just please throw your questions in the chat as we kind of go through each presentation. I'll kind of give them the time to just share, and we'll kind of save that Q&A for the end. But in between too, some of the presenters can be sharing with you within the chat too and responding to some of your questions. But I just want to make sure, sometimes like to do Q&A right after each presenter, but want to make sure each of them can share their information and then have more of a kind of robust, large discussion at the end. But provided some background here for you. And then really, we're just going to start digging into the different examples from institutions and the resources and things that they're using in terms of their welding and industrial maintenance programs. But again, you kind of saw us, EdSystems, as one of those partners, been working closely with colleges, with ICCB across many years now and continuing to support the PATH grant too. So it's just exciting to see CBE and all these different pathways and colleges. And, it's one of those really incredible programs. And it's also like, there isn't just one exact way to do it, right? But there are different guidances and models and things that you can learn from one another and then sort out how that's looking within your college, within your institution. And so just want to do a quick level setting here before we dig into the colleges and what is CBE. So it really does focus on that learning and the application of that learning rather than time spent in the classroom. And those of you who are familiar with or are new to CBE, right, this starts to ring some alarm bells and flags. And what does that mean for financial aid and scheduling and enrollment? And yes, those are questions that communities here have grappled with and continue to grapple with. But when we really think about CBE and why I'm excited too for colleges to share their resources today and how they utilize those is really making this learner-centered, making it flexible, a strategy for advancing educational equity and really thinking about, CBE, who are you doing that for? How are you thinking about, the potential market, the students who are going to be engaging in this and who you can really advance and skill up and get credentialed within your communities and work to be then again with your labor market, really thinking about your CBE programs as labor market aligned and skilling up a workforce and really accessing, those students, those learners who aren't able to necessarily go through a traditional program, but have the skills, have the motivation, have the desire in these fields. And so the different models, thinking mostly about direct assessment or credit hour based, and I know some of our institutions will talk a bit about that today, some of their crosswalks as well as their resources. We, again, in collaboration with colleges and with ICCB, have developed a variety of resources. I will be sharing this presentation and all the different links and a recording afterwards, so no worries about trying to figure out where all these things are now. But we did develop a lessons learned document. Whitney spoke to that backward design process with CBEN, and so we captured a lot of the thoughts there from the colleges participating that would be applicable really across programs, but also have some additional resources for you here. The competencies that were developed for both programs, welding, industrial maintenance, are embedded, incorporated within that Illinois Model Program of Study Guide for Manufacturing and Engineering. So they're listed there, but we've also gathered student insights into post-secondary CBE, have a recording about legal and regulatory considerations as you're thinking about this. And then we have a pilot project webpage that continues to stay updated with all these pieces. But with that, really do just want to engage here with our colleges and give them the time to share. Each of them will share for about 5 minutes or so. And then again, we'll have that Q&A at the end. So please not to, stop any questions right now from sharing out loud, but want to make sure everyone's able to share. But please put those in the chat as you're thinking about them. Our different colleges, as it makes sense to kind of respond to the question in the moment, please do so. Otherwise, if it's something more robust, we'll definitely have time here at the end to engage in that Q&A. And if we don't answer them all, we'll get answers for you outside of this time and get those responses to you all as well. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and here and turn to Rend Lake College to share with us first.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sherry Carpenter. I'm happy to be here. We have the welding. We have developed the welding CBE certificates. We have 2 certificates that are available. And we also are working on the industrial electronics that we hope to launch in the fall, or that's the plan. I had to smile within when Whitney mentioned backwards design, and that was something we had, been talked about. We've talked since we started this, as we started the process, but that was probably one of the hardest things that we had to get over, because we wanted to take that current welding program and work in it. And so we finally got our minds wrapped around, like, start with what do we want to accomplish and work backwards. And so that was hard for us to wrap our heads around, but we made it. We got there. One of the things that I did provide to Heather, a couple of things to show you. One of the things we did was the crosswalk. Heather, if you want to throw that up. The welding program, one of the things that we did have to do, and that's probably small to see, but one of the things that we did have to do is, for instance, some of our early beginner classes, the Weld 1270 class introduces the welding process in all the different processes, the MIG, TIG, oxyacetylene, all of the things. So we broke that up from a 4 credit hour class that we typically offer our traditional students. We broke it up into 4 1 credit hour. Reason being that would allow those industry partners to send someone or even somebody from the community who wanted to focus on stick welding or TIG welding. That would allow them to concentrate their studies. Maybe they didn't want the entire gamut, but they wanted to concentrate. So we hope that would open up the door for them to maybe concentrate and get that micro-credential in stick welding, or maybe focus on TIG welding, whatever, and go for that micro-credential. In the bigger picture, go through it all and get that micro-credential in that certificate. So that's what that document is. It's just kind of showing the traditional laid side by side with the competency-based education. The other thing we worked on was and with the group, like a lot of you in this room, if you will, worked on the competency maps early on. And that, again, hard to see, but we took that domain, created those competencies, and the performance indicators that, the things that we expect students to do to demonstrate their competency. And how do we want to get that done? Is it going to be through a formative type of assessment or a summative assessment? So this document has this is one of the earlier versions. We've morphed it even though welding was launched last fall. We're still morphing it a little bit as we learn things and talk to folks, and we are doing something similar with industrial maintenance. You may have noticed on the slide, and Heather and I talked a little bit about this, was the HLC approval. We did get our approval for both of those programs. I just thought it might be interesting just to throw out, of course, we fill out the form that HLC requires, but in the process, we tried to give them all the supplemental documents that we even dreamed they might ask about. So we had quite a list of supplemental documents that went along with that approval form. But things like you mentioned labor market data, that was something that we made sure to include in there. Of course, the welding curriculum, that crosswalk that you saw, so that they could see that traditional to CBE. We submitted grading rubrics and credit hour compliance forms where that's kind of our audit form that, to indicate that the credit hours are being achieved in that course. Of course, course description and credit hours, all of those things, schedules, and just a gamut of things that we tried to include in that HLC approval. Fortunately for us, I'm very thankful we didn't have any follow-up reports or questions or anything like that. So it was a good process for us. Noted there, Heather and I were talking, and some of my colleagues, we have a weekly CBE meeting. We did that with welding, and it was pretty much the faculty member and a member from our instructional design team, and they kind of, they helped one another. She was obviously helping the welding instructor with Canvas. He's familiar with it, but not all the bells and whistles. So that helped him build those courses. As we move forward with industrial electronics, we have learned that this has been helpful, and we've broadened the group. So we have instructional design represented. We have workforce development, and the director from that area involved, because she has that partnership with our industries. We have course faculty are heavily involved, and we have a gen ed faculty that we've brought into the mix, so he can learn more about the questions and the pieces behind it as we attempt to move or make our way into the gen ed realm. We haven't yet, but he's from English and he's very much interested. He's attended some of the conferences lately that we've gone to, and he's really interested in learning more about CBE. So we're hoping he can be kind of our bridge into the gen ed world as we continue to move toward this. So I'll flip it over to Chris and let him talk more about the industrial electronics side.
Sure. And you know, like what Sherry said, it has been really, really good to have somebody from the gen ed side. We have 2 people that attend our weekly meetings. Neither one of those are subject matter experts in industrial electronics. And it's been great because they ask some questions, you know, we get too close to it. And so you miss the forest for the trees. And so we know what we're talking about. We understand how this program flows. We've been doing it for so long, and having them look at it, they can ask some really probing questions. Why did you do this? And maybe we need to make some modifications to it. It's been really helpful to have their input because they're going to be looking at it like what a fresh student would be looking at. So when it came time to develop the courses and the material, we spent quite a bit of time, you know, how are we going to write this? How are we going to write all these labs? We use a lab book for some of this stuff. And we kind of settled on what was the easier thing for us was Amatrol. And so Amatrol makes a large series of different types of trainers, the hardware, but they also have courseware with it. And so we decided that we would rely on that. We're actually relying on 2 different things. We're relying on Amatrol, and then we're going to rely on something that's called SACA, the Smart Automation Certificate Alliance. And between those 2, that's going to cover most of our summative assessment stuff that we're going to do, and then our formative assessment, and then we're also going to use the SACA as our summative assessment. So let me share my screen and I'll talk a little bit. Oh, interesting. Oh, there we go. About what that is. So Amatrol has a website, and over here you can see where the content library is. We've got reporting, so we can actually see what the students have completed whenever they take one of these formative assessments that's in here. We would be able to see that and have them go through it. So I'm going to look at just the electrical control systems. So whenever you look at those, you can see that they have it broken down by what it is. You can launch the topic. They got good graphics. They have a narrator. The students can read it themselves. They can look at that content. And the content is actually pretty good. Let's go to electrical. So we just actually got these trainers, the AC/DC trainers. And so it starts off, that's one of our first fundamental courses. And it gives them a pretty easy introduction into that. Whenever you're looking at the content, it'll open up. And then the students can work at this, you know, at their own pace. And whenever it gets time, there's self-reviews in there. Whenever it gets to the point where the student needs to do a lab, then it'll direct them back over here to the website. And then there's the skills PDF. And the student can open that, they can print it, and it'll tell them what they have to do with that trainer in order to perform those labs. That part, we have them scheduled. We actually, in Canvas, have a link to where when it comes time to do those labs, they click that link, it takes them to the calendar, and then they can schedule a time that they're going to come in. We're not going to have just open, walk in whenever you want, because we have other classes that'll be going on. We want to make sure that the equipment is available to them exclusively for the time that they'll be doing the labs. And then we can also generate those quizzes. And so the quizzes are great. They automatically grade. The student will know how they did. We can allow the students to see the correct answers or not see the correct answers. And so this forms part of our formative assessment, and then that along with the skills PDF. Now, we're going to use SACA for the other part of that. And the thing that I like about SACA is they have very clearly defined skills. So what you have to do in electrical systems. And so the great thing about this is that test is going to be our summative test. at least for the knowledge base. And then we're going to make our own summative test for the hands-on portion of that. And we're going to base that off of Amatrol and keep it very similar to what they're looking at. But if they sit down with the SOCA test and they pass the SOCA test, they're also receiving a standard micro-credential. So we're not going to credential our students through our Canvas credentialing until they complete the 4 courses that make up the certificate that we're rolling out first. But this will give them that micro-credential for having passed that body of knowledge, which is basic AC/DC electricity. The other thing that I like about Amatrol is that whenever you get into Amatrol, they can actually see all this. They have access to the entire library, which is a lot. One of the things that we have learned and we're doing with this is that we can export this into what's called a SCORM package, import it directly into Canvas, and then there's one place. They get ready for that class, that section of the class. They click that, it takes them out to Amatrol, automatically logs them into Amatrol, and then they can work on whatever it is that they want to work on. So it just, yeah, makes things much, much easier for us. So yeah, that's where we're at with that. We suspect that we'll continue to use the Amatrol. We're buying more equipment to help support that. And then in the places where Amatrol doesn't cover it, those are the things that we're developing. But it has taken a lot off of our plate in terms of what we're having to develop.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Sherry. And thought that was helpful. You know, we've been this past year having groups come together and those who kind of volunteering their time to build out this repository and some of the things we're sharing with you here today. And, you know, some colleges have spoke to how they're utilizing current curriculum, right, and adapting that and being thoughtful about that within their CBE. So all that to note, you know, it isn't starting from scratch and coming up with a whole new set of materials, but really being thoughtful about how you might be utilizing current curriculum. Thank you all. And again, if you have questions for Chris and Sherry for Rend Lake, please go ahead and drop those in the chat. But I think if I'll take over share from you, Chris, then
Yep.
I will, or actually I'll just turn to Lyle, because Lyle, I think you're going to share your screen. So once. There we go.
Okay, hi, my name is Lyle Gross. I'm from Kaskaskia College, Industrial Tech. So we are neighbors of Chris and Sherry, just next district over. So we share a lot of probably similarities in some of our, but I want to take a look at the repository. So we are not currently Amatrol school, which is probably one of the reasons why we got picked for comparison, I think, here from Heather for today. So we run an Amatrol program for our high school program. So we run the Insight program for our high school kids that come here. But we do not run it for our college credit courses with our traditional labs. We are running a trial in the fall to add that. So before I came on, I ran a summary. I have 48 total students in my program total, including full-time and part-time, individual non-duplicated headcount. And of those, I have 11 students that currently run an evening lab. So I had a makeup lab for individuals who do not have the ability to attend class during the morning or daytime. And we run that right now on Thursdays, and we run it from 1 o'clock in the afternoon all the way till sometimes 9 o'clock at night. And so those 11 people self-volunteered basically for my CBE pilot, I guess you could say. And so these individuals have helped with some feedback on some documents. So this is a repository for industrial maintenance, everything from career planning all the way through ocean operations systems and others that these are populated by various schools, not obviously just KC. So Kaskaskia, one of the areas that we've been working in, I'm just going to click on operations systems just to look around. So in operations systems, the repository is broken out for curriculum, sample assessments, and by that, most of that would be considered formative assessments, and then the sample projects, that type of stuff is really reserved for the summative stuff at the end. So these are areas where we like to see as much populated as possible from as many of the colleges as possible. For instance, we go into the sample assessments. So these are things like HMI touchscreens. We got them broken out into individual areas, and these are all areas where some of our students have provided some feedback. So for instance, touchscreens, and then these are not Amatrol. These are developed with the help of some of our students. So for instance, I'm just going to click on one of these just to kind of snoop around and see, but using trainers, developing a program, they're given enough information to basically complete the task, but it requires a little bit of research on their part prior to arriving of how do I insert like IP addresses and that type of stuff. So there's some things there that make life simpler, obviously, for them, but it's coming in with the preparation. So those are some of the assessments that we see. The robotics, same situation. They're getting there's some elements here. There's projects that the students worked on over the past year that are traditional pick and place type things. The welding ones, there's some welding projects there too, also using the welding robot. So again, it's part of our comparison to see how much of that, just like Chris was saying, how much of that we'd like to see from Amatrol and how much of that we'd like to see from some of our own resources, particularly in order to meet the industry needs, because some of our industry partners can have very, very specific requirements. For instance, we have just on some of our assessments related to programmable logic controllers, we have people that need something from Mitsubishi, for instance, and that's not an Amatrol item. So we're going to be using some resources to help supplement some of the things that we would see from Amatrol. And I'm going to go back to the area, for instance, in operations systems. So some of the sample projects for the end. So these are areas where we're focusing on integration, something that is summative in nature to provide good, strong feedback. So within the operations systems, the students have the ability to develop skills in programmable controllers, touchscreen programming, motor drives, that type of thing. And then we want to see that all come together. So for instance, I'll just click on one of these, but the ability to put it all together. We give them just enough information. They have the ability to complete a completed project, wire it, build it, so on and so forth. But they don't necessarily get the face-to-face instruction that our daytime crew gets. So, which has made it a really, really good positive pilot group for us, because they're coming in, and I got people that are kind of working on this class, another group working on that class, and they're all kind of in the lab together. And so we utilize that really to our advantage to help develop these push the competencies out to actual assessments and projects. So and some of the others, for instance, our biggest one was how to handle individuals. We wanted to provide some feedback, just like Chris, where we have different equipment based upon employers within our area, and then making sure, one of our other goals is making sure that the projects themselves were integrated. We didn't want to have, for instance, islands of success, in smaller areas. We wanted those to. We didn't want to lose the one credit hour in this, 1 credit hour in this. We didn't want to lose the ability to kind of put it all together, right? And that's why you see some of the, for instance, on the project side, it's some of the summative assessment, forcing them to kind of go back and put some of those pieces together and develop it into bigger projects. Some of the other sources, I don't want to spend too much time on, but I'm going to go back into, I'll go to electronic systems, haven't been in there yet. And I'll go into some of the other resources, some of the things, some of the OER resources that have popped forward. We wanted to make sure that we got those in there as well. Just from a school perspective, it's hard for us to provide an Amatrol license and then still charge book fees for people. And so going into next year, we're making some adjustments to our lab fees to help offset some of those things, to reduce the cost of books, allow us to utilize resources such as Amatrol as well to help pay for some of those things. And our biggest help group really we've had is, instructional services has been a portion of it, but really it's student services, how to handle. They're excited about the ability to handle registrations throughout the year, so they don't have the time waits and things like that. But they're also worried about those things too, how those processes have changed, things that have kind of been historic over time. But we already do that with our prison program, so it's just another population of students for us. So, and with that, Heather, I'll stop sharing. So.
Awesome. Thank you, Lyle. And thank you again for all the work adding in some resources here to share with other schools. And I know we've had some really robust conversations within our group. I will, again, if you have any questions that I don't see them yet in the chat, but please feel free to populate those as I get my screen up here, and I'll turn actually over to Lewis and Clark. But I do have, so those links, those pieces that Lyle were talking through, they are going to be in this presentation, and you'll have access to those. And as you can see, all these colleges have graciously shared / I put it on there and they were okay with it, their contact info. So please just reach out. They're happy to be thought partners with you all. But with that, I'll turn it over here to you, Travis, at Lewis and Clark.
Yeah, so we've been obviously doing the welding program and things like that. And we've got our program broken into lecture courses and then lab courses. So our lecture courses that are our intro, our metallurgy, our print reading, and things like that. We pretty much just utilize our textbook companies. Basically, we use Goodhart Wilcox, and their teacher software comes with all of the stuff for making exams. They come with PowerPoints, and we'll modify some of that stuff, but it also comes with some gaming kind of stuff in there where students can do like flashcards and that kind of stuff. So I didn't see a big need to reinvent the wheel if I've got publishers that'll do that kind of work. So I focused a little bit more on our skill-based courses. And so inside that, and I'm assuming, Heather, that's a clickable link or whatever, but in that WPS index or whatever there. So I actually went through, and this was back in beginning of COVID, back in 2020, but I actually went through and made up welding procedure specification sheets for all of our welding processes and our common joints. So stick welding, MIG welding, TIG welding, flux core. With stick, I did 60, 10, 70, 18, but I went through and broke down by each position, each joint type that a student would need, basically. And then you could actually pull that WPS up. On that WPS, you will have all the information that the student needs. So like this is a flux core one here, but it'll actually tell you the student basically just pulls this sheet up, and then like that WPS number up there. So that's flux core gas, so it's a dual shield, and then the 1-1 means it's flat position, and then that's a square butt weld. So the numbers tell the instructor what it is, but it tells you they need A36 material. It's going to be 1/4 inch or 3/16 material. It'll tell you if there's any kind of prep on that plate. That's in that joint detail section there. And then as you scroll down into the procedure, it'll actually tell you everything. So it tells you the position, tells you your type of wire, the size of wire you're going to use. It's going to tell you the voltage you need to put, the wire feed speed, how fast you need to travel across, the type of gas, what flow rate that is, all that kind of stuff on that sheet. So everything that student needs is on that piece of paper. And these are the exact same things that someone will get in the industry if they're welding on a job site or in a job shop. They would get this WPS with all these parameters. So we're getting these students used to seeing this type of documentation just like they would if they're on a job site somewhere. So Heather, if you want to close out of that one, if you can go whichever position and go to one that's like a 27 or 28 or a 17 or whatever they are. But each one of those, like when you get into the bevel plates where they're doing more than one pass, each pass on there. So yeah, so just click on 27, 28. So here, if you zoom into the procedure part down there, you can see each layer of the pass that they've got to do is outlined individually. So they can just go through step by step and follow this basically as their guideline for how to finish that weld out and do it. So basically what we do, we still do all this on paper. And so the students will actually complete the weld and then they turn in their assignment sheet, and then the instructor, whatever instructor is present at the time, will sign off on that weld. So we still run all of our coursework in a traditional mindset, and we run everything as CBE, and we do that simultaneously. So in our shop, we could have traditional students and CBE students in the shop at the same time. And so whatever instructor I have in that course or in that shop at the time teaching a traditional class, they can sign off on any CBE students. So kind of like Lyle was talking about, we've got, you know, we may have a class of 10 students all doing stick welding, and then 2 guys doing aluminum and a guy doing pipe and somebody else doing, you know, fabrication layout all in the shop at the same time. So it can get a little bit hectic. We keep track of the students when they're in the lab using a time card. And that was one of the things like Sherry was talking about with HLC, trying to keep track of that time. So those time cards are how we keep track of when the students are there, what day they're there, how long they're there, all that kind of stuff. So, but I don't know if anybody's got any questions or if you want to move on to the next one. But that pretty much covers what that index is on. So.
No, thank you, Travis. There's one question. We have a minute here about, do you use AWS for competency certification / standards?
Yes and no. So AWS does not have any set standards for education. All of those WPSs are straight out of the D11 structural steel book. And so I went through and looked at the pre-qualified procedures and then just made those WPSs off of the pre-qualified procedures that AWS has. That's not, but they don't have a set standards for education, if that makes sense. They are working on that, but they don't have it done yet. So.
No, thank you, Travis. And thank you for sharing all of those resources. I know I feel like every single time you pull them up to someone, they're just like, this is awesome and really helpful to have. So appreciate you sharing this here for the community and other colleges who are implementing or exploring a welding CBE program. And again, please keep putting those questions in the chat, and they can be about these resources, or I know there's other questions about credit or non-credit. They can be general CBE too, and our folks here can help answer those. We have one more college to close us out here, but again, thank you, Travis, and thank you to Lewis and Clark for hosting that CBE Summit too last week. Yeah. And I'm going to turn over here to our team from Shawnee Community College.
Hey, thank you, Heather. First of all, can you hear me okay?
Yep, I gotcha.
Okay, would you start by going to the master list of competencies and assessments, please? Hi, everybody. I'm Dane Muckler from Shawnee Community College. So I was asked to talk about crosswalks. So I will focus exclusively on explaining how we made a crosswalk and why it is useful. So starting with why it is useful, if you look at the last, I think it's the last major question on your HLC application, explain how the institution sets credit hour equivalencies for these courses and programs and otherwise ensures that students have sufficient instructional time and out-of-class work to justify the credit allocations for the courses and programs. So I'm explaining to you how we answered this question. First of all, we started off, we hired a consultant. And so what the consultant did is she basically talked to our lead welding instructor, and he identified the tasks that he felt you needed to be able to do in order to pass the AWS Sense 1 certification exam. Those tasks became our competencies. So you'll see these in the master list. Heather, if you want to scroll down just to kind of like let people see, there's 84 of them. Initially, this is just a list, you know, what you should do. and they weren't originally awarded to classes. So he made the list. Then with the consultant, we filled out how would you test to see that a student is able to do these things. And so that's, you'll see in the columns on the right where it says like, well, there'll be a written test or skills demonstration. And then there's a little bit about like how that demonstration or test is going to work. That was the first step. Then we just had a list of 84 competencies. Then we bundled the competencies together. We used the lead welding instructor and he just assessed. So how many competencies can you get done in a week? If you're about an average student who is motivated, who is going to spend 40 hours a week at most on this. So you're going to treat this as a full-time job. So every 1 week's worth of competencies became a single class. Each class then became 1 credit hour. So we end up with 31 credit hour classes. Heather, do you want to move on to the, I think it's the first one. Here we go. This is it. Yes. Could you zoom in on that? Okay. So then what I did is I did a crosswalk. So it's just an Excel spreadsheet. But what I did is I took the old welding curriculum on the left. And so you'll see we've got like, introduction to welding. That was a 3 credit hour class. It still is. Gas metal arc welding 1, 3 credit hour class. And what I did is I went through these bundles that my welding instructor had made, and I figured out, working with him, which bundles are equivalent to a component of the curriculum from a previously existing course. So introduction to welding on the left side is equivalent to introduction to welding, metal cutting processes, metal working tools on the right side. So those 3 weeks worth of competencies were curricularly equivalent to introduction to welding. So at that point, when you go through the whole program, you end up with the crosswalk. So you'll see black spaces where my welding instructor made a decision that, we don't need 5 credits of shielded metal arc welding. We don't need 3 credits of metallurgy. So those were his judgments. In the end, the crosswalk is then justified. And the answer to that HLC question, explain how you set the credit hour equivalencies, it's justified by 2 different sources of evidence. One is just the instructor has asserted that, yeah, this is about a week's worth of material on the right. Every line is about a week's worth of material. And also when we did the mapping, the curriculum back onto the old curriculum, it ended up being 30 credit hours again. And so if the original curriculum was justified, and it was approved by the ACCB, right, then you would think that the new curriculum would be justified, right? Because it's just in competency format. Essentially, it's very similar to the same thing. It's just mostly been put into competency-based format. So those 2 sources of evidence kind of let me make the case that, we had a justified way of assigning credit hours to these new competency-based courses. And if you want to know more, I could send you the answer that we wrote to that question too. Just send me an email or something. Thank you very much.
Meant to unmute myself and not stop sharing, but thank you, Dane, for all that. And I know you shared a link to some curriculum, right?
Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot. So that's what the WIDS consultant we worked with, this was their output in the end. I just wanted to show this, their formal output. So this will show you course by course. And she also did a mapping onto the sense level, I believe. Yeah, you'll just kind of points out that every course is aligned to AWS Sense Level 1, and most of them are also Level 2 standards. And so every course is also aligned to a program outcome. Courses are also aligned to our college has core competencies, so things that every program is supposed to satisfy certain things. And so particular courses are aligned to these core competencies. So there's a lot of alignment in that final document too. I didn't use that full document to answer that question on the HLC. Sorry, that's why I kind of forgetting about it.
No, you're all good. Thank you so much, Dane, for sharing. And I'm glad we're having you all in this work here too to support the efforts. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing for a moment. I don't think I see any questions in the chat, but want to give folks, again, a moment to come off mute and ask your question, or if you want to put it in the chat here. And we can kind of, mix and match of who wants to respond, unless you have a particular question for a particular college. Although we've got a double question, same one. How are faculty compensated? Not sure if all of you all or a couple of you want to take that question.
I can tell you here at Lewis and Clark, the way that we've been doing it in the welding program is our faculty contract says that we have to teach 15 credit hours fall, 15 credit hours in the spring. So what I've been doing is I assign my faculty members a in-person course. And if we have not met the course maximum, I will then take CBE students and assign them to that faculty member until they meet the maximum. And so we end up just paying our faculty based on that full-time teaching load, like any of our traditional courses. So.
This is Lyle Kaskassi. Mine is offset through my office hours right now. So basically I get the paid overload time, but then it's I get relief on office hours for the CBE time we spend in the evening lab.
I see there's a question here too for you, Dane, about were the course objectives from your existing courses helpful or not in reformulating them into the CBE formats?
Were the course objectives or helpful reformatting? So ultimately, let's see, it's mostly, they're helpful, but like, I'm going to the subject matter expert, the welding instructor for everything. So he knows what's in his class, and he knows, then whether that's going to be equivalent to a chunk of curriculum in the new competency-based program. Thank you for the question.
This is April Teskey. I'm the Vice President of Academic Affairs at Shawnee College. So, Rob, if you are asking if we started with the existing courses and their course objectives and then busted those out into individual competencies, we did not do that. We started with the tasks that a welder would do, created competencies, and then created those courses, and then turned around and mapped them to our existing curriculum. Does that make sense?
You got a thumbs up there from Rob. And please feel free to come off mute or share your question in the chat too. We've got time. We do have a question here about how did you establish term lengths for your financial aid disbursements and reporting requirements? Not sure if there's any student services folks on here.
So I'm not student services, but we are trying to stay within the term as much as we can. Of course, if a student, we allow enrollment at the first of the month. So that way we're not just enrolling at any point along the way. We're trying to do it at the beginning of the month and allow those students to work as they can. If we get close to that term end, we will consider looking at some type of incomplete where we, allow that student to go ahead and work if they're close, similar to what we do with our traditional students now. It's still uncharted waters for us as far as financial aid and especially for me, because I do not come from that world. So I really can't speak to that. And we don't have anybody from student services on the call from Ren Lake to help us out with that. So I'm not sure I'm much help, but we can certainly find out and ask questions as Heather.
Thanks, Sherry. Oh, good, Rob. I've done the enter too soon on Zoom as well. Teams is even finicker. Finicker? Is that a word? Finick? I don't know. I'm losing it. We'll give a moment. I think Rob's putting a question in there. But others too, if there's any other questions, see what we've got here and then can move us to some next steps, because we would love for more of you all to join these conversations and, you know, about what resources are working, what resources you'd like. And so I have a bit of a follow-up form here, but yeah, back to your point about the backward design approach and what was most kind of difficult there, what you might have found particularly difficult.
So first of all, for Corinne, yes, I will pass your contact on. We are in colleague. We moved to colleague from Power Campus in fall of 24. So we're still kind of, you know, working through the hurdles there. But yes, we are on colleague. The backward design approach, what I think for us, it was getting it. The struggle was because we were looking at those program outcomes, and April mentioned, you know, they didn't look at program outcomes. We were stuck in that program outcome world, and this is what our class looks like now. And we finally like put that away and started to, and it's program outcomes and competencies and where we want them, our welders or our industrial, whatever the degree is, whatever the program, whatever competency we're trying to reach, are very similar. But it was finally like just stopping and pausing and saying, where do you want your student to be when they, like, what do you want them to be able to demonstrate competency in? So it was starting, you know, going back to that question, finding out what it is industry is going to expect of our student as they go into the workforce, and then deciding, okay, so how are we going to demonstrate that competency? How are we going to teach to that so that we, you know, prepare them to be competent in that world? So it was getting our mind away from taking an existing course and morphing it into CBE. You know, there's still going to be a little bit of that thought process because we just can't let go. But we were so deep into that world that we had to like step out, look at that backward design. What do we want them to be competent in? What are our employers going to expect? And then go backwards of how can we help them reach that competency, that to be competent into the work world. It was trust the process. I know Whitney or somebody said that to us a long time ago. Maybe it was someone from CBIN, I don't know, but we finally, that became our little mantra when we started struggling. We're like, backward design, trust the process. So we just had to continually say that from time to time. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, I think there's certain ways we've all worked in certain institutions, right? And it's hard to break that thought pattern sometimes, but even to call out to the resources you shared, Travis, right? We're doing that backward design also really helps you design assessments and materials that are what you're going to see in the workplace, what you're going to be expected to do in the workplace, and just really taking a critical lens on all of your work and how you're preparing, you know, your students to move into the labor market.
I might tag on to that too. One of the things, and I think Heather, you mentioned this, there's no exact way. And so we found with industrial electronics and welding, I mean, they're both in that, obviously in that CTE world, but there's things are done so differently. And what we believe is going to work in the formative assessment and summative assessment and welding is totally different. When we look at the other sides, and plus as Chris mentioned, with the SOCA and the Amitral that we don't have in welding. So we had to go things at a whole different way with the two programs. And I think that's going to be the case with whatever program we take a look at.
Back on the financial aid question, Dane, you can help me out a little bit here. You know, we've designed, we've not implemented. I just want to say that first. We will be implementing in the fall. And without financial aid people on here, this is probably a dangerous conversation to have. But I believe that that is going to be a per institution conversation depending on how you disperse and when you disperse. So for us, we have one disbursement date, basically. So what we are nervous about is we put somebody into competency-based classes, and then we find out quickly after the first couple of weeks, this isn't going to roll for this person. And then they're punished, right? With their aid, or they get a failing grade, whatever it might be. So we don't disperse until week 8, right, Dane? We disperse based on what they're registered for on week 8. Right. So what we've done is we have a very systematic checklist for our advisors to follow, and there will be a weekly check-in with all of the students with that advisor/coach. On week 6 is when the determination will be made with the faculty member and the student and the advisor on additional coursework. So that way, what will happen is they will only register for 6 credit hours at the beginning. And then in that week 6, they'll assess their trajectory, how well they're pacing, whether they can handle more. And it's at that point then that they will register for the rest of the credit hours they want. And that way on week 8, they'll be registered for that. So that's what we have planned to do right now. Now the wheels might come off when we actually get into motion in the fall, but that's what we've tried to do that we think will be the best case scenario for the students. So did I do all right on that, Dane? Okay.
No, thank you so much for sharing that. I know it really is, institution by institution, having those questions. There's guidance for these things, but it really is about having those in the weeds conversations with your teams. I do say there's another question here, and then I'll just do some next steps. But about, were any of the programs discussed piloted as non-credit while you sought approval from HLC?
We did not run. We got approval before we launched any of our CBE offerings.
Is something that Steven has recommended often for institutions that are having a lot of trouble sort of understanding how they're going to maneuver some of their business practices and operational sort of elements. So, but I'm not hearing that it's happening often, and it looks like, so Suzanne, you said you guys are exploring that. Yeah, I think that's a great idea, that you're, administering the program without having to worry. Obviously there's pros and cons to the non-credit side, but without having to worry about financial aid and all of those other practices.
Just a big thank you again to all of our colleges and presenters who shared today. Really appreciate your insights. As we all know in this work, the more you talk about things, the more you learn from others and how they're really doing things and making programs happen. That's the way you learn about what could be, what could work for your institution, or what pieces of it, what other things you might need to figure out. So I just really appreciate you all taking the time today to share your insights and your resources and all the incredible work that you are doing and the things you continue to, sort through and figure out too in this.